Okay, let's start out by talking about the wood we're using here. So this is hard maple. It's about 17 millimeters or 5/8 wide. It's about 14 millimeters or 9/16 tall, and the grain runs top to bottom this way. I'm going to be using this finished side as the bottom of the dog. You want is the smooth, flat surface, the smoothest, flattest surface on the bottom. If you have a choice, try to use the one that's got the best overall finish on it. I also make these myself. I use them to make dogs with. They're just what I refer to as a dog blank, but it's just a little wedge of wood that I pre-cut to make these dogs with. Now you can use these square pieces, and I kind of chose to use this piece because it's easily available in terms of it's a scrap piece, and you might be able to find it unless you have your own wood shop or can resize things. This might be what you're going to find out there in the wild if you just ask somebody for a scrap piece of wood. So we're going to start with that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to lay out the tail. The tail is this piece here, and that's the part that goes into the slot on the bridge. What I've done is I've put a mark on the wood that's about the width of the bridge, maybe a little shy, it's a little thinner, but I want to use the width of the bridge in order to guide how wide the dog should be. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to hold my pencil kind of like this, push my middle finger up against the side of the piece of scrap wood, and then I'm just going to draw a line using my middle finger as a guide, just right down the piece here. And then we're eventually going to cut away all of this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball this. You can measure it if you want. I'm just going to look at it and go, okay, I think that's about center. So this is where we're going to put the center line for that dog. The center line's important as you eventually do more and more layout. You're going to want a fixed line to guide from. So this is a good guide here. Now I'm going to wrap all those lines around the end of the dog and over the top to indicate where these lines match up top and bottom. So I'm going to do this real quick. So this would be the tail on both sides of the center line. So this is this thickness now. So the center line would be down the middle. This is the thickness of this tail. This is probably too wide in the way that it's laid out, but I'm not terribly concerned about that. I'm going to fix it later because you can't really get this exact on your first cut. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square, put the square across the bottom of the piece for the dog, and I'm going to draw a line that's 90 degrees side to side. So now you have a nice straight line across the bottom of the dog. That's going to be this point right here. This line is the pivot that the dog pivots off of. So this section rests against the bridge here, and it's flat here, and this should be dead flat to match the flat side of the bridge. So this line is in reference to this pivot point right there. After I laid out these lines on the bottom, which are the thickness for the tail, I wrapped them around the top and the end, just so I have an indicator all the way around as to where not just the thickness on this, but also the center line. I've wrapped the center line that I marked in all the way around as well. So now I have a thickness for the dog tail here, which is that piece there. So this is the next line we're going to lay in. It's a line that kind of angles at it's a very shallow angle, but it angles from this pivot point here towards the top of the dog, which is difficult to do in a three-dimensional drawing, but you can see here that it angles up and away here. So we're just basically going to draw a line. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to have, you know, 10.5-degree angle or anything too pre-prescribed. Just a nice shallow angle. You don't want anything that comes way out like this, because the farther this cuts in, you can see it'll cut way in towards where you're going to put the notch. So a very shallow angle is all you need. We're going to draw that in. I'm going to carry that line over. Actually, in this case, I'm going to use a square. I'm going to carry that line over to the other side. Give myself a little indicator there, so I've got a little mark there. Going to do the same here. I'm going to take this mark and put a little mark there, and then I'm just going to connect the dots. So all I'm going to do is come in like this and lay in this line there. So now you have the thickness of the dog, the angle of the dog, and on the front, or on the end and top and bottom. Now we're going to cut away all of this. All of that's going to be cut away. This is going to be cut away. This is going to be cut away. That's going to be cut away. That'll be cut away. And you're going to end up with just a little narrow piece of wood, which is going to end up being the tail for the dog. What I tend to do is cut these angle cuts first. So I'll cut these down. And I make sure that I try to stay outside, towards the cutout side, stay outside that line a little bit so that I can give myself a little leeway to work. So I'll cut this line in, I'll cut that line in, and then I'll cut these two ends in and try to, as I'm cutting them, I'll try to match this angle so that I don't overcut top or bottom. Essentially, you just want this point here, you want to cut down here and stop either before or at this corner. Same coming in this way. You come in here, you stop before or at that corner. Same on the other side, and you're going to end up with a nice little wedge sticking out the end. I'll show you here in just a second, but these are your first 4 cuts. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've made all 4 cuts here from the ends and from the sides. And all I'm going to do now, just to kind of get them free, I'm just going to use my carving knife and just wedge them in there and clean them up. Now that doesn't pop them out of there. It doesn't mean that you can do this all the time. Sometimes you may do a little additional sawing to free the part up. You don't want to pry on things too hard because you're cutting wood down to a fairly, you're cutting it down fairly thin, and if you pry really hard you might break something. So you want to get the tolerances pretty close as you cut. You can cut all the way through. I'm just using a knife here to kind of demonstrate that you can do this. There it is. And see, I didn't even get that clean. So, as I said before, you're going to end up with this little piece here, and that piece is going to be this angle cut here, like we talked about earlier, and this thin piece, which will be the tail here. And you want to make sure that it's straight top and bottom. So when you look at it from the end, it's a little off that way now and a little wide at the top, but when you look at it from the end, you want to see the center line down the center of it. You don't want it to be twisted one direction or other. You should be very conscious of the fact that this line, this tail, needs to be straight up and down to the bottom of the dog, which, as we said before, this will be the bottom. So it wants to be straight up and down. You don't want to see the tail twisted one direction or the other. So that's the layout for the tail and your first 4 cuts. So I've taken my file here and I've cleaned up the edges, made sure that the thickness is consistent on both sides of the center line. Tried to clean up this angle here to make it really sharp. It doesn't have to be perfect just yet, but you're going to want it to be pretty close to perfect later on. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and slide it into, or attempt to slide it into the slot on my instrument, just to see, is it the right width? Now, you're not going to be able to put it all the way in to start off with, but right now it's a little too wide. So I'm going to thin this out, and then I'm going to check it. But in the process of thinning it out and making sure that it fits in there, I'm also going to cut this angle. Now this angle is just going to be a temporary thing because we may adjust that later. But that's this angle, this drop angle here on this dog, that angle there. So I'm going to cut that angle temporarily. It may not stay there, but I just want to be able to make it the right size so that I can fit it in the tailpiece or in the bridge here. And I'm going to thin it out so it slides in and out evenly. You do not want to make this too thin. This should have maybe at the most a 0.5 millimeter on both sides of that slot. So it should be thinner by maybe, I would even say less than 1 millimeter on both sides. What happens is this wood is very thin, and with moisture it will swell. As things dry out, it will thin out. The tolerances need to be fairly close, but it still needs to be able to move when the weather changes. So we'll talk about that in just a minute, but that's the thing to start off with. You want to make sure it slides in there cleanly, and that is determined by the width that this tail is. Also, once again, while you're thinning it out, make sure you keep that center line in mind. I'm going to file it down to thin it out. I'm going to watch as I file it. I'm going to make a few passes, and then I'm going to check it, and then I'm going to make a few more passes and check it, and I'll keep checking it against the slot in the bridge. All right, I've cleaned up these inner edges here and made sure that they're really tightly 90 degrees. I've thinned out the tail so that it slides freely in the slot on my trumpet bridge, and I've cut this little angle here. Now I've got a whole tail that will slide in and out of the tail piece, and it's cleanly pivoting on against the trumpet bridge. The way to really check to make sure that it's cleanly set is look at this connection point right there, that little tight section right there. You're not going to be able to take the bridge off your instrument, but you can see that just by looking sideways across your instrument to make sure that this connection is good. Try to do both sides. Make sure that you check all the way around as you lay it in. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the height of the dog. The way you set the height of the dog is at the ear. This string, the trumpet string, originating at the ear and going across the dog, should be really parallel to the top of the soundboard. So you want this as parallel as possible as it goes across the wheel. And the reason is that if it's angled too much upward or too far downward, the response is not as clean across the wheel. As parallel as you can get it to where it crosses the dog is exactly the height you want. It can deviate a little up or down by just a little tiny bit, but you don't really want any extreme angles one way or the other. So try to get the string as parallel as possible, and the way you do that is you take the dog, slide it across the soundboard at the ear, take the dog on this end out if you have one in already, slide it in as close to the ear as possible. Sometimes instruments you may end up back here. You may have to do a little lifting on this end of the string to try to see where exact parallel is, but try to get it as close as possible. And then once you've got that, you're going to mark the side or the top or wherever is going to be a good indicator for you where that string rests on the dog in the height that you want it to be. So what I did here is I rested the dog blank against the soundboard and put a mark roughly about where the string height was, and then I carried that line over to set a new height for the dog I'm going to be making. So this is now going to be the top of this dog, and I'll transfer this around to the other side as well to give myself a good indicator of what it's supposed to look like. And now you've got the actual height set based on the string height at the ear. This time, when I was working on it, I decided I was kind of tired of the extra thickness here. So I just cut it down. I just did it with my knife because this isn't necessarily going to be a line we're going to keep. This corner we're going to keep, but the line and everything around it is going to go away. So this is your height here, as we set earlier. And now we're going to do the layout of the remaining portion of the dog. And we're going to cut this height first, and then we're going to do the remaining portion of the dog. Now, you can saw cut it. I just tend to just use a knife and trim it down, because all I'm really trying to get is to this height. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. There are some points that we're talking about in the dog that really need to be have a lot of care. And the tail width, these angles in here, this line here needs to be very true. But as far as this height set, it can be fairly kind of sloppy in here as you clean it up, but just don't go below that line. So we'll do a quick cut down. I'm going to cut out my center line as I do this, but that's okay because I've got a center line. I've still got a center line mark there. So this is all I'm going to do. I'm just going to cut this down and resize it, and I will come back to you. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the length of the dog. I have cut off the excess on the top. I've trimmed out the side here. So now I've got a fairly rough version of the size, the overall size of the dog that I want, side to side and top to bottom. Now we're going to set the length. The way that you set the length is you lay the string completely flat across the wheel. You slide the dog blank into the slot on your trumpet bridge, and then you mark either the front and the back. I just tend to mark the front of the string. So you would slide the dog blank into the bridge, and in this case, wherever the string comes across the dog, you would put a mark there. You want to do this with the tirant string completely slack. Make sure that this tirant string is loose so that you're not pulling, the string isn't pulling inward while you're trying to pull it outward. Now, when I say it needs to be flat against, the string needs to be flat against the wheel, that means you need to take the cotton off the string, and you need to adjust it so that when you put the dog blank in, you're going to pull outward on the string, probably from the back side of the dog blank here. You're going to pull outward on the string until there's a little gap, tiny little gap. Look straight down on the wheel as you're doing this. There's going to be a tiny little gap between the wheel and the string. Then you're going to slowly ease the string against the wheel. You don't want a lot of pressure. You don't want the string to bend inward. You want it to be perfectly straight across the wheel all the way to the dog. Once it's perfectly straight across the wheel onto the dog, then put your mark on the top of the blank, and that will set your height. I realized I said height earlier. I meant to say length of the dog. This tirant string is still tight on this example, so I'm going to loosen the tirant string. If I can do so without throwing the hurdy-gurdy off the bench. So I'm going to loosen that tirant string. I'm going to put a little slack in it. I don't want it to be super loose because I don't want it to fall off the tirant, but I'm just going to get enough that it's not tight. Then I'm going to make sure that the blank is snug in against the trumpet bridge, and then I'm going to slowly, you can see there's a little gap there now, so I'm going to drop that string very carefully against the wheel until there's no gap there. And once there's no gap between this string, once it's flat and parallel with the wheel, once it's flat, I'm going to just put a mark on the top here. And I'm going to put a mark that is parallel with the string. I just tend to put one in the front and then work behind it, but if you want to, you can do one front and back, and that will inform the front and the back of the string. So what that's going to look like when you're done is it's going to look like that. So now you have the length from the pivot point here to where the where the notch needs to be for that bridge. now that I have where the notch should be, roughly, this is not the exact position, but this is basically the overall position of where that notch is going to be. I'm going to take a straight edge, or a square, and I'm going to mark, I'm going to use the bottom as a guide here, and I'm going to mark a nice straight line, straight down. I'm going to transfer that line around the bottom here. And again, over the top. Actually, switch around so it's nice and flat. Okay, so there's the length of the front of the dog. That will be there. And you'll see in just a second, we're going to do the remainder portion of the layout. Go on there. Be straight. Stop. Okay. So, wow. Okay. Disregard that. That's way off. So here's the line that indicates the length, and this is the notch, and that's a terrible approximation. Anyhow, so what we're going to do here at this point is I want to lay in the tapping foot, this portion right here. I'm going to lay in this notch and the tapping foot. So what I'm going to do is I usually just go about 2 millimeters on either side. You don't have to be exact here because we do I'm going to do what's called tuning these dogs so that you can have a specific sound out of them. Some of them can be really fat and flat, and others can be really sharp and zingy. So I'm going to just lay in a quick line here and say, okay, so this square is going to be the tapping foot. The bottom of that part right there, that's this square down here is going to be this square right here. So this is the bottom of the dog. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this line up the side. You can do this freehand. I just kind of like squares that work out well. And then I'm going to draw a line this way. So once you connect those two, you now have this notched arch and the tapping foot laid out. Okay, so bottom of the foot and the arch, the relief on the bottom of the dog here. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out this this relief on the dog. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to cut this straight down so that it lines up here. And the way that I'm going to cut this angle is I'm going to start here. I'm going to make a small cut this way. So this line is just an anchor so that when you cut inwards, because I'm going to cut at an angle to match this angle here, I'm going to cut inwards. As I cut inward, if I don't pre-cut this, if I don't notch it or somehow give a guide to the saw blade will continually skip forward as you try to cut, and it's just a mess. So make sure you just put a score line there, and then you're going to cut inward. And it doesn't have to be perfect yet again. I'm going to cut inward just to get the depth that I want. So I'm going to be maybe a little bit deeper than that, maybe one more cut. Maybe 2, maybe 6. All right, that's good. Now I'm going to cut straight down this way. Sit down to do this. Once again, inside the line. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be right on the line. I just want to be close. And I'm going to cut down to the same depth as this angle cut. Okay, so cut down to the same depth of this angle cut here, straight down roughly. This angle in roughly is square. It doesn't need to be perfect. Then I'm going to take my carving knife. I'm going to stick it in this side, not that side, this side here. The reason I don't want to stick it back here is because this side is weak. All of this wood has been thinned out, and this side's got a lot of wood on it. So I'm going to stick it in on this side. I'm going to wedge that blade in there, and I'm going to twist. Just a gentle twist. I'm not pulling very hard, I'm not twisting really hard. Once I'm done with that, oh, come on, don't prove me wrong. There it is. Then that wedge will come right out. And now you've basically got a dog. So this is, by the way, cut 5 and 6. So those are your two cuts, 5 and 6. And when I talk about this, by the way, in a 7-cut dog, I just mean saw cuts. You're going to do a lot of carving. There's nothing in there that says it's not about carving, but these will get you these really quick results in that you can cut this angle, cut this down, and then just put the knife in there and pop it loose, and now you've got the setup for a dog with the length set, the height set, and the front set. We are at the point where we are going to shape the dog, and I prefer this profile. So this, if you look at from the top or the bottom, you'll see the wide point here is the wide point here. The narrow point on this is the narrow point on the foot, and then you've got the tail. But this is the general profile with the spine running this way, and then the notch up above, right above the foot. I prefer my notch to be above the foot. We'll talk about that in a bit. But let's be honest about this, that everybody has a different profile. They all like specific profiles. Many people make this style, but it may not be exactly this style. So the profile that you choose is the profile that you're going to use. Don't be afraid to try other things. I like this profile because I feel it works best for me, but try other shapes, other designs, and see how they work. I've tried a lot of different things. In the end, this is the shape that works best. So the way that I start out to get that profile or that shape is I'm going to start by cutting down the sides of the dog until I get near this foot. So what I'm going to do is just cut down this way, and I'm not going to cut, see, I'm not cutting back to the edge here, the end. I'm not cutting to this corner. I'm only cutting in this direction. And once I get to the width here, I stop. Once I do the same here, I cut this way and cut in, and I stop. I don't keep going. The reason I don't keep going is because I need to make this arch in order to make that profile. So this arch needs to go this way. And we'll see that in just a second here. But the way I start is by doing this. You have to be careful, because the one thing that will happen is that you can clip this and the whole end here will break off, and you'll narrow this down to nothing. So you have to be very careful when you're doing this that you don't exert a lot of pressure. All I'm doing essentially is just cutting in a little bit. Now that I've got a lot of that weight just flared out, nothing important or nothing grandiose there, just flared out. All I'm going to do is start here in this back corner. I'm going to start in this back corner and work towards my hand. This is a bad idea. Carvers everywhere will tell you that I am doing everything the wrong way here, but it's a tiny little piece, and I need to have very particular shapes. So I'm going to work first. Well, first I'm going to take off the weight up on top here. So I'm going to take this down, so where the spine of the dog would be, I'm going to cut that down very carefully. Don't slice your fingers open. I've done it multiple times. Then I'm going to work from this corner inward, and I'm going to work in a scooping motion. I'm not going to cut across this way and try to scoop out, because you'll likely chip out the end of that and it will break. I'm going to work from this end towards the inside, and as I do that, I'm going to scoop a little bit and I'm going to stop. I'm not going to keep pushing in hard enough that I slice this in to hit my hand. Be very careful of that. Be very cognizant of the fact that you're cutting towards yourself. So you want to be careful. It takes some force though. So you still need to be strong about it, but you want to make sure that as you do it, you're just cutting in little parts at a time. Don't try to take a huge swath, and don't try to take off big chunks that might end up towards the backside here. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to thin this out. And you see I'm scooping in as I go. So my hand is here, and as I cut, I scoop and shift the blade this direction. I'm essentially making this cut there. Now I'll also cut this away, and what I tend to do, I don't know that it makes a terrible lot of difference, but I haven't necessarily seen it, but what I tend to do is try to make the spine, the upper portion of the dog, this part right here, I try to make that spine the same width as the tail. So I'll cut that in. Oh, did I cut too far? No, not big. Okay. I'll cut that in a little bit, take the weight off, so I've got less wood to deal with on the top on the so that when I'm cutting this in, I don't have to cut so much up here, and then I can work it. I can even work it a little piece at a time. Work the outside in slowly, do the top, and work your way towards the bottom as you go. Probably not the best thing to do while staring at a camera and looking at my fingers through a lens while trying to pay attention to 2 or 3 times at the same idea. So hopefully I won't start bleeding anytime soon. Okay, I'm going to do a little cleanup here, do a little more cleanup, and get this shaped in a little more. This is really rough, really rough. It's probably rougher than I normally do, but I'm usually not making videos while I do it. So, the same idea on the other side. And one of the important things while I'm doing all of this, and one of the important things that I want to continue to express is be careful, and also sharp knife. Use a very sharp knife. You never, as my friend who is a chef said, he's never had a sharp knife cut him. It's always, I keep moving away from the camera. It's always a knife that's dull, that he has to put too much pressure on, that cuts him. So make sure your knife is nice and sharp. Try to find a good, reputable knife maker. Like I said, this one is a guy named Joe Gertner. He's a local, just a local guy. Does this out of his workshop, and I really prefer this chip knife edge because I can stick my thumb behind it or pivot against it. I can push in on it this way, and it's parallel with the handle. And I like them to be parallel with the handle because I feel like I'm getting the control, a linear control when I do that. Now, not all these knives are the same way. There's a lot of other knife styles. Just choose the one that you feel fits you best, but make sure that you get a fairly good one. There's a knife company called Two Cherries. I am not really fond of them. I don't like the thinness of the handle. You may really love them. They be your favorite knife ever. But the one you're going to likely find online pretty quickly is a knife that I can't think of the name of right now, but I'll have it out in just a second. I'll give you a walkthrough on those particular knives. So this is it. While I'm talking here, I'm carving this down, cleaning it up, trying to get the lines and the angles right, making sure that I stay true to the front of the dog, which is this line here again. So that line is the front of the dog, and that is the notch. So I'm going to try to make sure I stay true to the front of the dog there. And I'm going to continue to use the bottom here as my guide for where I want my tapping foot to be. and then I'm going to continue to carve inward a little bit. We're going to straighten out this notch here in a little while as well, but this is how the carving goes. And almost done. So that's pretty much it. It's a little off. Oof, I missed that. See, this is what I'm talking and doing videos. I don't pay attention too much, so I'm just gonna straighten that out. I'm not fond of that. I want it to be straight end to end. Yeah, still not happy, but it's a demo. Nobody's gonna tap you with it. All right, so there it is. That's essentially, it's still attached, but there it is. Now I'm going to clean up this notch on the inside. We'll talk about how to do that. I'm probably going to raise it a little bit, essentially enlarge this a bit, just using my file, and then we'll recut this. We can do it now. Actually, we'll just cut the tail so that it's now at the height of the top of the dog. Cutting end grain is a bit more difficult, so be careful. End grain doesn't like to is tough. Cutting across end grain is a bit of it's harder to do, and it takes a little more control. It likes to really kind of tear out. So just be careful as you do it. And yeah, so there we've cut our angle there. So now we've got this angle. It just comes up to that point right there. So it just matches that point there at the height. And we will cut the bottom here off as well, or cut another angle in the bottom here once we get it lined up. Before I cut this angle on the bottom of the knife, I like to make sure that I haven't made any errors on the bottom of the dog as a whole. So I'm going to leave that until the end, and that'll be our last thing. But right now I'm just going to clean this up, and we'll go back to making this notch. Okay, I cut down this a little more, relieved a little more weight in the inside here, and filed this out. While I was filing, I was very careful not to roll over this edge, that edge right there. Very careful not to roll over that edge so that I didn't damage this line. This line is very important. This particular line right there is very important. And we'll talk about that in just a second here, but I want to show you what I was doing. Essentially, sometimes I will sacrifice my thumb a little bit and put my thumb in there to stop it, to hold it in place and stop it from moving. I'm very light on it, so I don't damage my thumb. But and then I also use the front here to set the length. I use these little half-round rasp cut files. I don't tend to use the fine files because we got sandpaper for that. Finer files are okay, but they just take a lot of time to take weight out of anything. So I tend to use these. If you buy one of those little sets, they're not very expensive. I don't have any here, but they're not very expensive. They can be found on Amazon. They can be found online. Your local supplier may have one. You probably have them at your local Ace Hardware or Home Depot, or wherever you are in the world. If you have a local place that you can find it, but Amazon definitely has them. And they're little sets. They have the square files, these little half rounds, and they tend to be smaller. They tend to be, maybe half this diameter or half this width. I mean, and there's all of that serviceable because you're just making little parts. So get yourself a good file, and it doesn't have to be terribly expensive. So I filed that in. I finished that as much as I could for now. I'm going to leave it just the way it is. Now let's talk about this back edge back here. Talk about this line right there. This line is where your dog pivots against your bridge. If this line is not true, if it's not flat, that means that one side of that is cut in more than the other, which means that it wants to do this, because now this side is shorter than that side, so it want to twist. And you'll notice that when it twists, that it locks the tail in on this side and on that side. You've essentially locked the dog in by creating an untrue square line. And the dog will twist like that, and it will bind here and bind there. You do not want your dog to bind in the slot. You want the tail in there to move freely. And the way to really get this in line, or to move freely, is to make sure everything is truly in line right there. So that pivot moves very cleanly. Okay? So just make sure as you work that these two lines are 90 degrees to each other all the time. If they're not 90 degrees, you can fix it at the end, but it's certainly something to pay attention to at the very last run through of looking at and shaping the dog. But that is a very important line right there. It's a very important guide. Keep that in mind. You don't want one farther in than the other. They want to be dead even across the side and dead flat that way. The other thing you want to pay attention to is that one is not higher than the other. I've seen dogs where this portion has been completely clipped off. And now you've created a line that is now farther up here that's inset from that line there. So essentially, you don't want that. It wants to be dead flat, dead even, side to side. That's your pivot point. That's important. That's the part that makes a successful buzz for that particular style of dog. That allows that to pivot in exactly the right place. So be really mindful of this particular line, up and down and side to side. All right. We've made 6 cuts, but there are 7 cuts, you say. So there's 1 cut, 2 cuts, 3. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. I mean, there's got to be one more because it's a 7-cut dog, right? Well, let's just cut it off. So that's the last cut. Just free the dog from the rest of the wood, and then we'll clean it up after that. So let's just do this and try not to slice my fingers or do the standard thing. I always tend to work over trash cans, and for some reason, these little, they're little small trash cans at my desk, and I always drop the dog in the trash can every time, and for some reason, I never empty the trash can before I cut it, and so I'm always searching through the trash to try to find the dog I just cut off. So there's the dog. It's very kind of stubby compared to these other ones, but I want to show you that it's not really about how the dog is shaped. So this is the one that came out of the instrument we've been kind of demoing on. This is the one that I just made, and this is one that just happened to be on my shelf over there that I had set aside. So you can see that there's a pretty there's a pretty big difference size-wise between these two, but this is really an indication of your instrument, not the sound you're going to get out of the dog. This is how you set it up for your instrument, the height, the length, and then after that we're going to discuss the tapping foot here. So now that we've got it cut clean, we're going to clean it up a bit. What I tend to do is get my carving knife out, and I can see it's a little, I don't know if you can see, it's a little lumpy right in here. This is kind of fat. I'm not really happy with that. I don't like the way that the front is a little fat here. This is not really even and smooth. It's not exactly the style I like, and it's a bit of a chonker there. I'm not super not super happy with this back here. So I'm going to clean all that up. This is really kind of the last stage of it. Now you could file all this down. You could use some sandpaper and clean it up. I tend to just use a knife and very carefully. See, I cut towards my thumb. Bad idea. Don't cut towards your thumb on a regular basis. Be very, very careful. Gentle cuts. I am the kind of person that slices their finger open and then runs over, grabs some super glue, and just super glues their finger back together and goes back to work again. But I know everybody is not like me, so I just want you to be really careful as you work. I'm going to take out this right through here. Clean that up. See how it's starting to shape up here? See, this one's a little flat right there. I want to take a little of that, more of that out. This is all, I mean, you could technically leave some of this. To me, it's just the cleanliness of the work that you do is often an indication of the kind of work you do. And so the cleaner you can make it, it means you've spent more time paying attention. You're looking at the details. So look at all of the details. One of the things I don't like here is I don't like this, how wide it is in the middle, right here. Hey, don't bump the stand or it gets all wiggly. I don't like how wide it is right here. So I'm going to actually take a little weight out right there. Now I could probably file this out, it'd be easier, but I got my knife in my hand and we're just cutting away. So once again, very careful. They're your fingers. If they're my fingers, I can do what I want, but be careful with yours. Okay, so I'm kind of doing that little sweep in. That little sweep in shape I like. I'm going to even that out. See how it's starting to get thinner here? And I'm bringing it straight across, once again, towards my thumb. Bad idea, don't do that. Or at least, you know, put a bandage or some tape over your thumb or something. I'm bringing it in and bringing it straight and flat across. One of the things I absolutely do not do, and it's the one that always cuts me when I do this, is I can bring the knife straight into my thumb this way, and I tend to be okay. But the minute I move my thumb or swipe the blade one way or the other, I immediately slice my thumb open, so be careful. Okay, once again, now I'm looking at the bottom, see where the foot is there. I'm going to sweep that in and go right along that foot. Now, if you're, like I said, if you don't like this, if this makes you uncomfortable, or you're not one of those people that really likes to go grab the super glue to glue yourself back together, make sure you just do this with a file. You don't have to go in all the effort of, you know, triage afterwards. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. Once again, cutting towards my thumb because, I mean, why not? Okay. So I'm a little bit wider on than my layout. I'm a little wider there, but that's okay. I can file that down. But I have got those little, I put those little sweeps in. I've taken some of the weight out of the middle here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about dogs and why they do what they do. A dog is a hammer. So if you think of it like in terms of I don't know, old style, you would call it a trip hammer, in that it lifts and falls by some mechanical means. Now the mechanical means that we use is a string, and that means that because it's a hammer, it works off of weight in terms of you know, if you hold a handle, if you have a hammer and you hold the handle really close to the hammer head, you'll notice, ooh, I'm way out of screen, you'll notice that the hammer falls harder if you hold the handle way out at the end. The problem with holding the handle way out at the end is that it takes a lot more energy, and your little string does not impart a lot of energy into the dog. So what I like to do is make sure that there we go, that's nice. Make sure that there is as little weight between the pivot here and the hammer, or the tapping foot on this end. I like to make sure that there's as little weight between here and here as is practical. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to get it down to the point that it's super thin, but you want to make it practical. This might be a little thin. This might be, you know, it could be a little thicker here. It could have a better thickness to across the middle. This one is the old one out of that dog, I rolled it out of that hurdy-gurdy, and it's a little thinner there. I've double notched it for more pressure in both sides. But you can see how you shape the dog really is an indication of how much weight will end up on the other end. Now, how much weight is this? Well, how much is it moving? And how much energy is imparted to it? It's really about the energy you impart to it and the amount of weight that energy is required to move. I have a bit of a pause for distraction. So I was talking about the weight and the overall shape of the dog and how essentially these little notches and the foot really impact the overall sound of the buzz, the dog in general. And there are a lot of different designs. Let me show you. So there's what I'm going to just generally refer to as a big old chunker dog. I mean, there is almost no weight removed from the bottom down here. That is a dog that may have great response. It may sound amazing, but you really have to try it on your instrument to see how it's going to sound. The other thing I want to point out about some of these is that you'll get a lot of makers that put their notch in the midpoint between this angle and the end of the dog. This one's actually kind of funky in that it leans forward. This is actually, if you were to put this straight up and down, that would probably be the front of the dog, not this angle out here. But they tend to put it behind the foot. So they'll put this notch back here behind the foot. Now, I was talking about how you might hold a hammer, and if you hold a hammer near the end, it takes more energy. You get more out of it, but it takes more energy to hit a hammer, to use a hammer from the end than it does to use a hammer from near the head. So the closer you are to the head of a hammer, the easier it is, the less effort or less energy you impart. Rather than holding it down here on the end, you impart a lot of energy versus up here you only impart a little bit. But how much energy do you need? How much energy is it going to take to make this little dog buzz? And that's kind of a critical point on how you set up your dog. Where do you put your notch? How big do you make your dog to make the sound that you want? So a lot of people who lay out their dogs, they lay them out so that the notch is kind of in the middle of what would be the arch here. So that notch would be towards the middle here. I like my notch to be right over the foot. And I like the notch to be right over the foot because, here's an example, there's way forward on the foot. I like to do that because I'm holding the hammer farther forward. I'm holding it way up close to the hammerhead, or in this case, the string is holding the hammer farther forward versus farther back. Now, farther back, like I said, you can make more sound out of it, but it takes more energy to move. This takes very little energy to move, which means that in my experience, the time that I've been making dogs, I've found that the closer it is to the center, the closer the string is to the center line of the foot, the more responsive the dog is. I just, not louder, not quieter, not less or more buzzy, but more responsive it is. I am now holding it farther up to get that sound out of it rather than farther back. I don't need as much energy to make it respond, so it's quicker to respond closer to the center line of that foot. This dog, this style of dog, is a bit, it takes a little more energy. Now, how much more energy? Well, I don't know. It's really dependent upon the string that you use, the instrument you have, and how you play. So really, when you lay your dog out, that looks all kind of funny, all kind of crazy. When you lay your dog out and try it. Try making a dog that's a little longer. Try making a dog where the notch is exactly over the the center line of the foot, like that one. And see how your response is. The idea with all of this is so that you can make more than one. Make as many dogs as you can in order to fit the style that you like. Try different designs. Try chonker here and see what it works for you. Try the skinny little one and see how that works. There are some that are kind of in between this. The other thing that you'll see is this, when I make them, I make this line fairly straight up and down. So the front of the dog is fairly straight up and down. This is a little forward, but there are makers or people that make these dogs that tip the front of the foot, the tapping foot, they tip it out extremely. So instead of being straight up and down like this, it is way out forward. The notch is still over here, but the foot is way far forward. So this is more of a V than it is this arch with a straight down. I'm going to swap to that one. There we go. So yeah, so this, see how this comes up? It's got the little arch in it. Oh, come on, just focus. It comes up, it's got the little arch in it, and then it comes straight down. Some people make them so that that line really V's out. It really comes out, and the foot really kind of angles way out forward here, so it sticks way forward. It's really about how the person who made it wanted to make that dog to really kind of get it the sound that they want. Try it. Make a bunch of them. See what works for you. Make the small little ones, make the chonkers, make the forward leaners, make the back leaners, whatever you want to do. Try it out and see what works. This design, this particular style, that particular dog right there is the dog that has always worked for me. It has always been successful in making a dog like this sound. So I tend to stick to this shape. Now, I've tried lots of other shapes, like I said earlier, but now we're just talking about what are you going to do? What works out for you? Try them out, see what works best for you. In this particular case, I've cleaned this all up. So now you see that little curve in here. You see this little curve on this side. It's pretty straightforward up and down. It's got this nice little notch in it, or nice little cutaway in it. The foot is about the same size as it should be there in terms of how I originally laid it out. This is nice. This is nice and flat across here, like I talked about earlier. Now, there's one last thing to do. I'm going to put it in the instrument. I'm going to check the notch. So here's my original notch, which is not straight up and down over the foot, but we're going to find out what works best. So there's my original position for the notch. Now, if I'd have put this in here, just imagine how short that dog would be. It'd be down here. So I did extend it a little bit. I'm more towards the back of the foot, less toward, or more even towards the middle of the dog. But once I put it in, I may find out that notch, this notch position changes. So the first thing you want to do before you put any notch in it, before you do anything else, is take this out, or take this over to the instrument, slot it into the back, slot it into the instrument, and check that string the same way you checked it the first time. Make sure that this is where you want that string to be. And remember, straight across the wheel, flat across the wheel, very, very little tension against the wheel. Just set it right on the dog. If you need to remark it, remark it. If these are your original notches, or this is your original notch position and it works, then that's what you're going to do. You're going to stick with that. So go ahead and test this now that you've got it all carved up, because I'm assuming that you did this exactly the same time as I did. Now that it's all set up, I'm just going to go check it in the instrument, see if it's exactly where I want it to be, and we'll come back. Well, there we go. While making a video a little earlier, I ended up talking about how to put a notch in the dog, and then I ended up chipping the front end of the dog off. So I'm going to talk about how to put the notch in the dog, and it doesn't really matter that the front is chipped off, but now that there's a notch in it, I can't really, say, hey, there was nothing there. But so we're just gonna talk about how to do that. So what I do is I make sure I put the dog back into the instrument. So this goes back into the instrument. I make sure that I lay the string across the top of it yet again, just to make sure that the alignment for the wheel to the dog where the notch is going to be is exactly right. And what I found out is that the notch lines that I had made were actually too far back, and I had to move those lines a bit forward, so I put a notch, so I started my notch, and what I did was I cut straight down with my knife, and sometimes I saw a little bit, cut straight down, and then I cut inwards a little bit. So I'll cut in, and I make a very small little notch, not nearly as big as this one. And then I often will just take sandpaper and use the sandpaper like a file and cut inward to create a bit of an undercut for the dog. And while I was doing that, I was saying, yes, you could also cut inwards with your knife a little bit. So cut in this direction with your knife, that direction. Oops, let's see, how can we do that? There, that direction. And then cut into that line. And while I was doing that, I damaged the front end, or just popped the front end off. Does not make a difference. Just a little chip here, but that's why it already has a notch in it. So I'm going to take the sandpaper and do the same thing here. I'm just going to sand it in. So I have all these great files that allow you to do this stuff, like you do it on a guitar or any other instrument, and they all cost money, and they're all, they all take up space, and a little piece of sandpaper will do the same thing, because you're not going to do this every day unless you're a luthier, and then you're going to own the tools. So I'm just sanding it in a little bit to get a little notch set for where the string will rest. Then I'm going to take this. I've already done this, by the way. I take this and I'm going to put the string in there, put it in the instrument, put the string in there, and then I'm going to check to make sure that that's exactly right. Now I put the string in and I buzzed a little bit, and then I realized, oh yeah, I didn't do that thing that I was talking about doing at the end of the end of the work, and that is the little upward sweep of the tail right here. Now I will show you here. You can see that the tail is flat against this flat surface. And that works great if I did not want it to move. But I want it to pivot. And it cannot pivot from that position. It has to have a relief cut right along here to allow the front of the dog to lift up. And I do that by taking the knife, setting it right on that line, right here, right between those, right exactly on that space between, or right on that line from that pivot point. Turn the knife and take a very shallow cut. Now, once again, you could do this with a file, but I think the file gives you some opportunity to really damage this upper end. Hey, it's kind of archy. It's got a nice little curve there, but it doesn't need to be. It doesn't have to have a curve. It just needs to be relieved. Now, that relief we'll show again. Now you can see the little space between the back of the dog, or this tail, and the dog. So now if I push down on the dog, you can see that it lifts up. There we go. So you can see that the front lifts up very, very subtly, but it lifts up. You could probably cut that more, and I could probably just trim off this little section here to give it a little more lift. But the thing is, you don't need it. I have looked at slow motion videos. I've looked at the dogs. I've stared at them while people were buzzing, and I've come to realize that they move very, very, very little. The front of the tapping foot on the dog moves so imperceptibly that you really don't need much of an angle at all on the back end. And it all pivots right there at that point that I told you was so important. it has to pivot here, or it needs to be clean in order to make this pivot. And then you can see that it lifts up. And that pivot really is like I said before, really needs to have a really concise, true line there. So that last little bit, this last little cut that takes off this little angle, which is slightly shown there, where you can see it kind of goes up. I mean, like I said, difficult to see, but that little bit is all you need. I have seen these cut with very extreme angles. So I've seen them almost this cut this way, so that the tail was like that. And I don't feel that that's necessary, and actually to some degree it might not be a good thing, because the tail that the amount of the tail that you can get into the slot to keep the dog stabilized, the more is better. So you can see that this takes off half of that length, maybe about half of the length of the dog, and gives you a very short distance inside the bridge versus this end. So this cut with that extreme upward angle doesn't give you as much distance as the long, this very narrow angle, very short angle. And the reason that is also important is because the length here does two things. First, it stabilizes the dog. It allows the dog to have more control on the back end from how much it wants to twist. So when you adjust the string, does the dog follow the string? Does it twist the direction that the string is going? And as you buzz, will it correct itself so that it puts itself right back correctly in the slot? Some dogs will do this, others will not. Sometimes you have to fix them after you adjust the string, or tightened or retuned the string. The other thing that this provides is a little extra weight. Now, we were talking about this being more like a hammer, and the hammer pivot point is here. So you've now got a little extra weight on the back end to help the front end pivot. The very short ones don't provide a lot of weight, but they also don't provide a lot of stability. They tend to let you twist, the dog twist more within the space. And that tends to lock the dog up and cause it to not buzz correctly. So I prefer a longer tail that fits the full, or at least as much as you can get inside the slot for the bridge. Not I mean, this is extreme, but reasonably as much as you can get. For some reason, some makers make their slots like that long, and I don't understand. It really needs to be long. It needs to be a longer slot. So you want this to move freely in there. And the other thing that this does is, as you adjust, it allows it to bind up faster. So if you put a shorter one in there, you get more extreme movement. This gives you a much shallower angle, so it gives you less movement in it. So the tail really does have a fairly high value in terms of how this responds, or how it continues to play and doesn't bind up. The other thing is that the tail in general will inform you as you're playing as to the humidity. Because if you have this very tight, if you have the tail kind of tight on the slot, if you don't have enough clearance side to side, you don't want it, like I said, no twist, not too much twist there, but if you don't have much clearance side to side, the tail will swell up and it'll bind right in there. It'll tell you, yeah, it's humid out today because I'm not going to play. So just make sure that you've got a little bit of movement side to side. Make sure you've got, it should essentially, if you tip the instrument up, if you're sitting with the instrument flat and you tip it so that the dog is aimed downward, the dog and you lift the string off of the dog should fall out. It should not be, you shouldn't be able to lift the string off the dog and the dog will remain there. The dog should fall out as soon as you take that string off. That shows you that it's free and ready to play. The other thing that I like to point out is that the width on the back end. The reason I like the width on this back end, I like it to be so wide, is this is stability. This portion right here, this side-to-side thing, really helps this from walking too much side to side. I've seen these dogs where the tail is this portion of the pivot is only that wide. And what happens is when it's that wide, it really, and for some reason, whenever they make these very thin like this, they also make the tails like that. And when they do that, what happens is that as soon as the string starts moving, without these kind of way out here, think of it more like a tripod. You know, you've got this stable points. God, come on, can I get some focus? There you go. Think of it more like a tripod. You've got this width here and the center point or the front point. This is stable. If you move these way in on both sides, then it just wants to fall over. So, you know, it really just is about the stability across the front of the bridge and how much that twists. So I like them to be wide, almost the width of the bridge. I like the tail to be longer. I like it to have a longer throw inside the slot, inside the bridge, so that it doesn't move side to side so much. Also gives us a little counterbalance for that pivot point, and gives you movement without causing this to lock up. Now, those thinner ones, like I was talking about, if you move the string, they'll move and they'll bind up. And you can see this is lifted off that side there. And when they bind up, they don't play, and you're going to work and work and work and work, and it's not going to play because it's bound up. You may have to do the standard thing, which is to grab the front of the dog and do you flick it, and when you flick it, the dog will jump up and the string will push it back down again, and it will kind of move itself back into position again. So then it's true again. It's true in the slot. But if you're playing, you don't have time to do that. So I like these to be wide. I like the foot to be this back tap, this back bridge. The back tail to go into the bridge a good long way, and the front tapping foot to be nice and stable. So everything here is flat. The last thing I'll do in order to make sure everything is flat is I'll take this. Now you can focus down there. There you go. I'll take this, the dog, set it on a fine piece of sandpaper. Hello, come on. Don't, hey, stop. Runaway dog. And I'll very lightly give it a couple of passes. And what I'm trying to do is just keep this height consistent across the whole thing. Okay, so that is a dog made, a dog with a notch. Now we're going to put it in and play it, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about how to tune these. So the last step, I'm not using the one I used earlier because I like it. It worked well on the instrument. I think it sounded good, so I'm not going to mess with it. So I'm going to mess with another one that just happened to be on the scrap pile. It's not super clean, but we're really going to talk about tuning, not necessarily design. So what I want to point out is the tapping foot. Now, I have a bad habit of referring to this as a foot and this as a foot. I've really kind of given over to calling this a pivot, the pivot foot and the tapping foot. So I'll refer to this as the pivot sometimes, but I will always refer to this as the tapping foot, and I will always refer to this as the foot. So just so you know, the way that I like to tune these, and you say tune them, but it's not really tuning. I'm not going to bring them to any particular pitch. That's the job of the string. What I'm going to do is make them more or less concise. I'm going to make them sound crisper or cleaner or more shrill or buzzy in terms of how I adjust them, or what I refer to as blatty. I don't know how else to describe it. It just sounds flat and overly kind of just it doesn't sound clean. And so this is an example. Well, that is not an example. That is an example of a foot that I would consider to be blatty. So when you play it, it doesn't go buzz, buzz, buzz. It goes blat, 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 blat. It's just, it's really about the sound you want, but it's not my preferred sound. I just don't think it's very crisp or clean. So that's that particular shape, that big fat foot. So when I say I'm going to tune it, what I mean is I'm going to make it the crisp sound that I want it to be. Now this one's fairly close to how I would, the overall shape and size I would like. But if I feel like it's too, it could use some cleaning up, a little more crisp sound, I'll take my knife and I'll just cut down. I'm going to say shim down, but that's not right. I'm just going to take off a little width here on the dog side to side. So I want to make it even, so I'm going to basically make sure that I do the other side as well. And you can see I'm just taking little thin, tiny little thin wafers off of there. Nothing extreme. And the other thing I like, and maybe it's me, I just find it nicer overall if the dog has a fairly square foot. Some people like them rounded. I just like them square. And I like them square because I like to make sure if they're square that they're in line with the back end. One of the things I see often, and this is a bad example because it's not the one I made, it just happens to be, like I said, scrap pile version. One of the things I see often, I'll see if I can find an example. Oh, there's a good example. That the front of the dog twists. So whoever made this dog, it wasn't me, whoever made this dog, this is flat back here, but the front end of the dog twists this way. So this dog actually sits square, but the foot does not. The tapping foot does not. So I really like to make sure that that's square, and another way to do that is to really look at it while tuning it. Is it square here? Like I said, this is a bad example. This is one I just grabbed. But is it square up and down this way? Is it true to being in line from top to bottom? And then if I don't like that, I can clean it up a little as well. I'll clean up little things, big hands. I'll clean up the sides a little bit to make sure it's nice and true top to bottom. This might be a good example of that. Oof, way off. Okay, that's better. Not good, but better. So I'll trim that down as well, and that takes some of the weight and gives me a nice profile here. I like to have a foot that is, maybe a couple of millimeters by a couple of millimeters. Let me see if I can find my scale here really quick. This particular one is 3 by 3. So this particular foot is 3 millimeters by 3 millimeters. And I kind of like that size overall. That's how I tune them. I just take the weight, literally just take the weight out of the dog in general, clean it up, and try to get the best response I can. 3 by 3 is probably 3 millimeters by 3 millimeters is probably the standard I use. I wouldn't make it smaller than a 2.5 because then it just gets very buzzy. I don't know what to call it. Not buzzy. Very zippy. I don't. What is the word? I don't know the word. Anybody, you put it in the comments. But just very kind of, you know, zissy. It doesn't really sound so clean. It doesn't sound like a buzz. It just kind of sounds annoying. Of course, you know, there's a lot of people that say the buzz is annoying, but you know, they don't enjoy the instrument like we do. So that's what I like to do. I just like to thin it out to tune this. If the foot on your dog, wrong one again, if the foot on your dog is bigger like this, you're going to have to, the other thing too is this requires a lot more energy to move than that. This, your string is only imparting so much energy into this dog as you play, and this takes a lot more energy to move, and tends to have a flatter, like I said, that blatty sound, whereas this one tends to just be a standard, nice, crisp sound. So that's the way I tune these. Let's go on to theory. Okay, why does the dog buzz? What makes it buzz? Why does it do that? This is just a side view. This is the string across the wheel, and that's the soundboard down below. When you play the dog and you give it a little extra emphasis on the dog, the wheel carries the string upwards. And as it carries the string upwards, it lifts the string a little bit, or sorry, lifts the dog just a little bit. It gives the dog a little tip that allows the dog to move more freely. So it can be planted on the soundboard here, but when you give it a little extra impulse, it allows it to just tip easily. Once again, if it's going to tip really easily, if it's just going to come up, you're basically taking the pressure off of that, the downward pressure on the string, and relieving it a little bit, and then it causes that the dog will start buzzing. So when I talk about why that pivot is so important, that pivot point on the back, and why the tail is so important in all of those parts, it's because this is where the physics comes in. You're giving that string that wheel a little extra speed. That is pulling the string upwards with it. That is relieving the pressure that is bearing down on the top of the dog here. So the string is notched in there, and it's holding the dog to the soundboard. If you give that string a little relief, then the dog is going to come up. So what are you doing when you're buzzing? You're actually just giving it relief to buzz. Well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're allowing it to just move enough upwards so that the string can do the work. So if this is what we would refer to just as the zero line, or the center line for the string. So this is where your string sits when you're not playing it. It's just dead flat, not doing anything. But then when you start playing it, it starts moving. It starts going up and down and up and down and up and down. Now, this particular string being on this side of the wheel, being as flat to the soundboard as possible, being as far on that far curve, I'm going to use a wheel cover, that far arch, because I don't have a wheel. I don't know. There you go. So if the string sits here, you can see it's on a fairly flat portion of the wheel, versus if you put it up here and you were to try to make it go upwards, it's not going to want to go upwards because the pressure is down and you're trying to lift it up, and it doesn't want to go up, it wants to go back. So that's why the dog is way down here. Well, that's why it's parallel with the soundboard, to give it that little impulse, as much of a flat upward surface as possible to pull the dog upwards. So what happens once you give it that little relief, that little tension relief, then the string starts coming. The string will go up and down as it's making sound, and as it goes down, it does nothing. But as it goes up, it lifts the dog that tiny little imperceptible distance. And then when it comes down again, remember, this was your neutral position. So this is where your dog is sitting flat against the soundboard. It's sitting flat like that now. That neutral position is flat. Once it goes below the neutral position, it can't go any farther downwards. But it can create enough energy in this upward arc on its way to the downward arc to bang on the soundboard. It wants to go farther, but it can't. So it snaps against the soundboard. And then it comes back around again, and now it starts rising again. It lifts the sound, or lifts the dog again, and then the repeated wave across that string cracks that thing back into the soundboard again. So every time you buzz, it lifts up that little imperceptible bit, and then it hits the soundboard, can't go down any farther, and does nothing. And then comes up again, hits the soundboard, and does nothing. So that's why it buzzes. That's where that zzz sound comes from. It's hitting, coming up, hitting, coming up, hitting, coming up. So it's not. It's tapping to the extent that it can, and then lifting up and tapping back down again. But this movement, the movement of the string, is really based on the amount or the size and the type of string you use. If you have a very kind of floppy string, I refer to, there's a nylon string used for guitars, nylon B, usually for a classical guitar B string. They tend to have more movement. They tend to have a lot more of this up and down movement, but it's not strong. It allows more movement up and down, but it doesn't snap the dog back into the soundboard with a lot of force. So I prefer, in cases like that, to use a string that has more tension. Now, in the case of a classical guitar B, I would switch to, say, a Savarez carbon fiber, a KF string, or some other version. You can use a Quia string. You can use any number of different strings, but the nylon strings are the softest, and they don't impart as much energy. My preferred string is always gut string, because they seem to be really balanced in the energy they put out and the type of sound they get. But if you don't like that, I just wouldn't go with a guitar string, a guitar B. If you can swap it out, get yourself a good like KF string. If you use a big wound string, that energy is going to be much more, but the sound you're going to get is completely different than if you put a KF string on there or a gut string. You're going to get a completely different sound, and it may not respond as well as you want, because you're still trying, through this little movement of the buzz, you're still trying to take a thicker string, which requires more energy to move, and you're trying to make it move in a tiny little energetic burst. Every time you buzz, that little energetic burst you're giving it is this tiny little energetic burst. The more energy you have to put into it, the more it's going to cause the string to move, but the more it causes the string to move, the bigger reaction you're going to get. You just have to work harder at it. So I don't like to work as hard to make the buzz, so I tend to make the foot smaller. I tend to make sure that the string is a good tension, and I like to experiment with the way that my dogs work on each string. So that's the theory behind it. The idea is that your wheel is going to pull upwards on the string. Now there's a point at which it's called a stick slip, and it works for every bowed instrument, and that is the rosin on here against the cotton on the wheel, on the string, will cause the string to come up. And when it reaches the point that it's reached its maximum tension, it will fall back down again. So stick, it pulls up. Once it reaches the maximum tension, it slips back down again, and then it will come up again and slip back down again. And so it does this thousands of times per second, even tens of thousands of times per second. It just keeps doing this stick slip movement. And as it does the stick slip movement, that is where you get that is where you get the energy, the additional energy imparted into it. You've created a standard stick slip here where you just regularly play like you're going to bow, and then when you give it extra energy, it wants to really get it really wants to give it more energy now, because you're really giving it that extra burst of buzz to get it to go, and it'll climb a little higher or get a little more stick to it. And the reaction afterwards is this up and down, slam the dog into the soundboard. That is the theory behind how a dog works. It's also why I said so often that the back end really makes a difference. I just grabbed a dog here off the thing, but this pivot really makes a difference. How that works all makes a difference. It's really important that you kind of understand how they work in order to understand how to build them correctly. So I'm going to talk about kind of shapes and sizes and different aspects of dogs right after this, and then that will be the end. Okay, dogs come literally in all shapes and sizes. I mean, there's all kinds of different designs in how people make them. I don't have a Hungarian dog here, which is a completely different design altogether. But we're talking about how to make these particular styles, the standard, what I'm referring to as traditional or French style dog. The most standard kind of traditional style here would be something similar to this one. Just a longer tail, an arch, the notch near the front, the foot's not too big, the pivot's nice and wide. That's more standard. So then you get into the bigger ones here, like I was talking about earlier, where they're just have a lot more weight to them. I would say, you know, you can actually make a dog like this and leave all this weight in here, and then you slowly just carve it out to see what it sounds like. It, you know, the theory of leaving extra wood so you can trim it out later is actually very valuable on this. So do what you want that way. These are the ones I'm not particularly fond of. This particular style where it's leaning forward heavily, so it's more that V. The tail on it is very short and it's very, very thin. See how thin the dog is across the back? So this doesn't provide a lot of stability. And the very short tail means that inside that bridge, and this is not really fit for this bridge, but I'm going to show you an example. So that's how it would sit in there, and you can see how far that dog will deflect when you're just adjusting the string. So you can adjust the string and this dog will deflect that far over because it doesn't have any stability. There's no width here on the supports, and the tail is very, very short, so it only goes in there very, very little way, and it's been cut in, which makes it even worse in that now you've given a lot more room. So that's the deflection on that particular dog, which is why I don't like them. I don't like them. I want to be able to tune my dog and have it stay in place. I don't want it to walk every time I tune it. So not my favorite. These are not the style I prefer. And also, it, like I said, leans way forward off of the center line, or the center line of the notch, which that one. So there's, I mean, not the same, but that one there would be closer. Whereas this one's got a much farther forward leaning foot, tapping foot there. So not my favorite. I don't prefer these styles. You can try them out if you'd like. None of the. By the way, I'm not the hurdy-gurdy dog police. You don't come to me and say, by the way, you said I shouldn't do this, and somebody said, and I think this works great. It's fine. If it works great for you, great. I'm not the police. I'm not going to come by and take away your birthday. Everything's fine. You're in good shape. Do what you want. This is just how to make a dog. This one, man, look at the tail on that thing. That is so stubby. This came out of an instrument somewhere. Or no, I made this one to fit in an instrument. I know. I made this one to fit in the instrument, and that is all of the length that was available inside the slot for that dog. So way too short. Much too short. Kind of same here. Same idea. That forward lean with that really short tail. It's wider. I like that. I like the stability on the back end. It's got this rounded front end. It's more work. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I haven't found a significant sound difference between this one and a square one, but that's the, you know, if you like that stylized design, then have at it. This, I think the tail is much too short, and I think this one also came out of an instrument where the slot was very, see how narrow that tail is? The slot was very narrow, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters at the most, or maybe 1.5 millimeters, and it just didn't. It was I think it had 3 dogs on it, and just didn't afford the extra space in order to put a full length tail on there, and not my preferred version of that. So this one came out of an instrument recently, just very recently, that I was working on. And you'll notice, first off, the tail is not straight to the dog, the rest of the dog. It is not, I suppose it's fairly straight, but actually it's not fairly straight. You can see it's farther over this way on the bottom than it is on the top. So it's twisted this way, and so it's twisted like this. So the whole dog, the tail is like, or all like this. The foot is not tuned. It's not very clean. It's got a big flat spot here. It's not terrible that it has a big flat spot, but I really like to take that weight out. It's not super wide, and it's not straight. I mean, compared to the pivot front to back, this side is way off. So this came out of an instrument, a newly built, ready to play instrument. I'm not going to say who the maker is. I'm not going to. What I'm going to say is that you need to take the dog out of your instrument. Brand new, seems to play just fine, maybe doesn't play just fine, maybe you're struggling. Take the dog out. Look at it. Really inspect it. Really find out, is it right? Is it correct? Is everything about the dog that you have in your instrument right now, is that one correct? Right? So this one is not. Like I said, the tail is twisted. It's very, very thin. I think the slot was about 4 times the size of this. So it's very, very thin tail. The dog, it's not straight to the tail, which means that it sits like this, and then you can see that the tail is also then angled. It's not straight to itself so much. I mean, this side over here, it kind of twists that way. So, like I said, out of an instrument fairly recently built. So check out the dog in your instrument. This thing. Okay, so I talk about making dogs out of anything. I think these are walnut. I think this particular one might be a walnut dog. Once again, it's very thin, super thin on the tapping foot. Not super thin on the back end, but narrower than I'd like, but not straight. Like the tail isn't straight. Also came out of an instrument from the luthier. So not straight. This little corner is clipped off. Kind of same here. Really fat foot, but it otherwise looks good. It doesn't look twisted. This, it's a little less than flat here, but it's not twisted. But you can see, if I hold it straight, you can see that this side's way off to the side, and it's a little unsquare. But also new out of an instrument, came from a maker that way. I would adjust this. But this is the one I'm particularly talking about, because I get this question about these all the time. Well, why don't I just make it out of this, or why don't I just make it out of that, or why don't you go ahead? I mean, 3D print it. Make it out of ABS, make it out of titanium. I've made one out of completely out of bone. I've made one completely out of ivory, elephant ivory, well, mastodon ivory. I've made them out of boxwood and hard maple and ebony. I've made them all various different things all over the place. Just whatever is gonna make the instrument sound better or sound at all. In this case, This is one of the ones that I started on, and I ended up making a different one because I had to double notch it here. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to react the best, so it's got that funky little horn. It's like a unicorn there. But see that little plate on the bottom? This was a dog that was originally on an instrument that had, I believe, 3 dogs. So all the dogs were on plates in the bridge, and I think this might have been the very top one, or at least the middle one. And it didn't sound. The plate tends to flex when you buzz on it, and I like a very crisp, really kind of loud dog. Not everybody does, and it didn't react the way that I wanted it to. And sitting on the plate, it really kind of had a deadened sound, and I didn't like that. I wanted to really make it buzz. So I cut the tapping foot off, just trimmed a little piece off of it, and stuck some bone to it. And then when I stuck the bone to it, I just filed it all down and sanded it all down, and like, it's not perfect here, but I think this was a failure. And then I put the dog onto the plate, used some sandpaper underneath it, and sanded it flat to the plate. And that was the dog that was sounding the best, because it had a much harder surface on the bottom. So really just give it a try. Like I said, I'm not the hurdy-gurdy dog police. I'm not going to come to your house and take away your birthday. I'll help you out if you need it, but you just tell me, you can say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll help you out there. But just try it. If somebody says, what about this? Just tell them, try it. There's no problem with it. So feel free. Do what you think is going to work best. There's a lot of different designs in dogs. There's no one particular dog that is going to work for every occasion. Find something that works for you and do that, as long as it works for you. Now, I only have one last thing, and it's fitting your dog to your instrument, and I'm going to show you real quick. We're going to nix all the dogs here. And I'm going to get a little piece of sandpaper while the video wiggles. And what you want to do is take the dog in the instrument with the bridge. I'll use one of these I just threw away there. And I want you to take, with the dog in the slot with the string on it, I want you to take a piece of sandpaper and put it underneath the front of the tapping foot. Right there. Just set it there, and then I want you to push down on the front of the dog. So push down here, which is difficult to see from straight up and down, but I want you to push downward. And then while you're pushing downward, with this thing blocking the way, while you're pushing downward, pull the sandpaper out. Do it again. Do it maybe 3 to 5 times. And you're going to pull it out. And what you're going to do is you're going to keep looking for the sandpaper to have the full width of the foot. I can't see it, it's bad. It's just bad lighting. But you're going to look for the sandpaper to have a mark on it that's the full width of the foot. So you can see that actually did sand out the bottom of that and gave it a nice flat finish. Now, what that does is when your dog is in the instrument and you put the sandpaper underneath it, you are contouring your dog to the instrument. So it's going to sit there, you're going to put the sandpaper underneath it, you're going to pull it, and that's going to contour the bottom of that dog to your instrument. I'm just using probably 400 grit or 320, just fine sandpaper, nothing really heavy. Just put it underneath the foot, drag it out of there, and then that will contour your dog. You may have to do that maybe, twice a year, but don't really overdo it. Just maybe 3 or 4 passes in and out. Just 3 or 4 total in and out, and that's all you got. The other thing, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of this, is that inside this little slot in the instrument, when it sits like that, you tend to get a lot of junk right in here. All the stray cotton bits and the lint and everything else is gonna end up inside this slot. So about twice a year, pull the dog out, take your dog, just take it out of the instrument, get something that'll reach in there, and you can use anything. In this case, the end of this file that I happen to have, you're going to stick it in there, and you can use a stick, you can use whatever you want, stick it in there, and just clean it out. Just not hard, don't really, hammer on it. Just stick something in there and pull it out. If you've been playing your instrument for a year, I guarantee you, if you have never done that before, you're going to pull something out of there. So a little maintenance on that, a little maintenance on the foot, and that's all you need in order to keep that dog working. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and hopefully if you have any questions, you'll post them, and I hopefully can do some follow-up videos, and hopefully everybody has learned today how to make a dog. Have a great day.